I am going to preface this sermon. This sermon is political. If you don't like it, now is the time to get up and leave. That is not to say that this sermon is partisan. It does not affiliate with one political party or another. But it does call us to account in terms of how we live our lives as individuals and as a community. It calls us to account in terms of how we proclaim and live out this message of a God who is a God of grace, but also a God of justice. This sermon is political. I begin with the story of a man that I met at the Mexican border. He was from Oaxaca, Mexico, had been a sharecropper, had owned some of his own tools and supplies, and had grown corn for years and years. But what has happened over the course of the last 17 years is that there are these people who have come to Mexico, and they have started underselling the price of corn. They have started undercutting what these small sharecroppers can reasonably raise and sell their crops for. And little by little, as these sharecroppers and even farm owners move off of their land, some of this land is bought up by other people, other corporations. And these individuals are forced to flee to Mexico City, perhaps to try to get a job or live in a slum, a ghetto there around the city, or they try to find their way across the desert, across to the United States. These individuals are longing to know justice. They are longing to know that there are people who care for them, who will speak for them. And it's not a foreign or abstract story. When we hear the words from the prophet Amos, who is known as the prophet of doom and gloom, he is countering this same issue. There in the northern kingdom, guess what has happened? There has been the rise of the city. And within the city, there are businessmen. Some might today call them corporations. And they are building silos and granaries and storing up the goods that they have and cornering the market. Then when there's a bad year, when there is a drought out for the farmers, they will go out to the farmers and they will provide them very graciously this wheat, this corn that they have stored up. They will sell them back, their own goods, in a sense, at a huge profit to the businessman or corporation. And if they can't pay, they can always turn their land over to this businessman. In a sense, the poor are being trampled on by businesses and corporations. And today, this same thing is happening in Central America. It is happening in Chiapas. It is happening in Oaxaca. We have American and international corporations that have undercut their grain, their corn, go in, sell them American corn and grain, buy up their land, drive them from their land, and they are trying to find a place, trying to find work, a means of making a living. And then, as they try to cross the border, we call them felons. We call them illegal, undocumented. We degrade them again, beating them down. All because of a very corrupt and harsh way of being, a harsh system. And the prophet Amos speaks to us today to say, are you, people of God, are you willing to stand up and say that it is wrong? Are you willing to say that every person deserves livelihood? Every person deserves care? That our corporations must act ethically? The businessmen must look out for those who have the least, to deal with them fairly. Are we willing to do that? Now, I say that it is nonpartisan in that while we like to think that maybe one party has a little bit of the corner of the market when it comes to immigration or dealing with corporations, let's be honest. NAFTA was signed into being and ratified by Bill Clinton, a Democrat. And yet, some of the same rhetoric that is being espoused today is by Republicans. So there are people on both sides that aren't getting it right. And so we look into this issue, and we as people of faith don't have to take a side politically in terms of a party, but we do need to speak out. We do need to show that we are going to care for and walk with those who are being beaten down and walked over. Are you with me? Are you willing to take that stand and be a voice for all of those who are being beaten down? Now, Oaxaca and Chiapas is a ways away. But where are other places here in our country where that same thing is happening? If some of you were at the Synod Assembly here in April, May, you also heard resolutions about usury and the rates that are being imposed on those who are struggling to pay their home mortgages, those who are struggling to make credit card payments. Some of them are as high as 35.99%. Imagine that with me for a moment. Imagine that cost, and will those people ever be free from debt? What is our moral obligation as people of faith to say this is wrong? To stand up and call corporations and businesses to account. You see, we are a counter-cultural people in many ways. When we follow in this tradition of the prophets, of Amos, when we follow in the ways of Jesus. I would also say, as we come to this Peace Sunday, as we recognize economics as one part of what can provide global peace or stabilization, that there is also a power dynamic at work. And I love this letter to Timothy because we have here a writing that turns power on its head.